Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the untold truths behind reality TV's most unforgettable stars. Today, we dive into the dramatic rise and fall of 90-day fiancé couple Julia Trapkina and Brandon Gibbs, a story that began with love and hope, but ended in betrayal, scandal, and heartbreak. When Julia first arrived in America to be with Brandon, fans were captivated. Their chemistry was undeniable, their struggles relatable, and their journey seemed destined for a happy ending. Viewers rooted for them, believing that love could conquer cultural differences, family drama, and financial challenges. Their wedding was celebrated as proof that true love could survive anything. But behind the cameras, a darker reality was unfolding. According to our confidential sources, Brandon Gibbs was secretly involved in romantic relationships with multiple women. He has been seen meeting his girlfriends at various restaurants, revealing the complexity of his personal life. The story did not end there. According to secret sources, Brandon Gibbs became entangled in a massive financial crisis after suffering huge losses in the stock market. Eventually, he fell into a $200,000 debt trap. When he failed to repay the installments on time, legal action was taken against him. The creditors filed a lawsuit in court, and after a long investigation and hearings, Brandon Gibbs was arrested by court order. According to the court's verdict, Brandon Gibbs was sentenced to 7 months in prison. With this truth exposed, the situation turned even more tragic. His wife Julia Trapkina became overwhelmed and ultimately decided to leave him. And finally today, Julia Trapkina divorced her husband Brandon Gibbs. Later, to start a new life, Julia Trapkina engagement a man named Alex. Alex is a banker. This is more than just a reality TV love story. It's a cautionary tale of choices, consequences, and the fragile nature of trust. So, buckle up as we take you through the rise and fall of Julia Trapkina and Brandon Gibbs, a journey that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about reality TV love stories. Let's start from the beginning. Julia Trapkina and Brandon Gibbs first entered the spotlight through TLC's 90-Day Fiancé, a show that thrives on cultural clashes, family drama, and the pursuit of love across borders. Julia, a vibrant Russian woman with dreams of building a new life, met Brandon, a young American from Virginia, whose quiet demeanor contrasted sharply with Julia's fiery personality. Their love story began like a fairy tale. Julia was swept off her feet by Brandon's charm, and Brandon was captivated by Julia's energy and passion. When Julia moved to the United States, fans were instantly drawn to their dynamic. She struggled with the realities of farm life, clashed with Brandon's parents, and voiced her frustrations openly. Yet, through every argument and every tear, there was an undeniable bond between them. On screen, they became one of the most talked about couples. Julia's candid nature and Brandon's boy-next-door image made them relatable. Viewers saw them as a couple who could overcome obstacles, who could prove that love was stronger than cultural differences. Their wedding was celebrated by fans worldwide, symbolizing hope and resilience. But behind the smiles and scripted moments, cracks were already forming. Julia often expressed her discomfort with Brandon's lack of independence from his parents. Brandon, on the other hand, struggled to balance his loyalty to his family with his commitment to Julia. These tensions, though seemingly minor, laid the foundation for deeper issues that would later explode into public scandals. At this stage, however, the world saw only the fairy tale. Julia and Brandon were the couple everyone wanted to believe in, the couple who embodied the dream of love conquering all. Their journey was filled with laughter, arguments, reconciliations, and promises of a brighter future. Little did anyone know, the perfect beginning was only the calm before the storm. As Julia and Brandon's love story unfolded on television, fans believed they were witnessing a couple destined to overcome every obstacle. Yet, away from the cameras, a different narrative was quietly taking shape, one that would eventually shatter the illusion of their perfect marriage. Confidential whispers began to circulate among those close to Brandon. He was seen at restaurants, not with Julia, but with other women. At first, These sightings were dismissed as harmless meetings, perhaps business-related or casual friendships. But the frequency of these encounters raised suspicions. Brandon wasn't just meeting these women once or twice. He was cultivating relationships, each one hidden from Julia's view. Behind closed doors, Brandon lived a double life. To Julia, he was the husband who promised loyalty and stability. To others, he was a man entangled in romantic affairs, juggling emotions and commitments that contradicted the vows he had made. The secrecy added layers of complexity to his personal life, creating a web of lies that grew harder to maintain with each passing day. Those who witnessed Brandon's behavior described him as careful, almost calculated. He chose discreet locations, often small restaurants tucked away from the public eye. He avoided places where fans of 90 Day Fiancé might recognize him. Yet, no matter how cautious he was, secrets have a way of surfacing. For Julia, the truth came in fragments, rumors, subtle changes in Brandon's behavior, unexplained absences. She noticed the late-night phone calls, the sudden excuses to leave home, the vague explanations that never quite added up. At first, she brushed them aside, convincing herself that stress or work might be the cause. But deep down, doubt began to gnaw at her. The emotional toll was immense. Julia had left her home country, sacrificed her comfort, and endured cultural clashes to build a life with Brandon. To discover that he might be betraying her trust was a wound deeper than any argument with his parents or any struggle with farm life. Brandon, meanwhile, seemed trapped in his own contradictions. He wanted to maintain the image of a devoted husband while indulging in relationships that contradicted that very image. The pressure of living two lives weighed heavily, and cracks began to show. This chapter of their story wasn't about financial ruin or legal battles. It was about betrayal. It was about the quiet destruction of trust, the kind that erodes a marriage from within long before the world sees the collapse. By the time Brandon's secret meetings began to multiply, the whispers were no longer confined to private circles. Rumors started to ripple through the community, carried by those who had seen him dining with women who were clearly more than just friends. The restaurants he chose were discreet, tucked away from the bustling crowds, but they were not invisible. Eyes noticed, voices murmured, and soon, the shadows began to speak. At first, the stories were vague. I saw Brandon with someone, or he looked too comfortable with her. But as more people witnessed these encounters, the details sharpened. He wasn't just sharing meals. He was leaning in close, laughing in ways that betrayed intimacy, and holding hands when he thought no one was watching. These weren't business meetings. They were romantic rendezvous. The secrecy added fuel to the fire. Brandon's attempts to keep his double life hidden only made the rumors more compelling. Each time he slipped into a quiet corner booth, each time he left home with a flimsy excuse, the whispers grew louder. Soon they reached Julia. For Julia, hearing these rumors was like being struck by lightning. She had fought so hard to defend her marriage against critics who doubted their love. She had endured cultural clashes, family interference, and the relentless scrutiny of reality TV fans. To now face the possibility that her husband was betraying her in the most personal way was devastating. She confronted Brandon, but his answers were evasive. He denied, deflected, and insisted that people were misinterpreting innocent meetings. Yet, Julia's instincts told her otherwise. The late-night absences, the sudden urgency to leave the house, the unexplained phone calls, it all painted a picture she could no longer ignore. The whispers didn't stay private for long. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé, always eager for drama, began to speculate online. Social media threads buzzed with theories, screenshots, and alleged sightings. What had once been a private betrayal was now becoming a public scandal. Brandon's image as the devoted husband began to crumble. The boy-next-door persona that had charmed viewers was now overshadowed by suspicion. Julia, meanwhile, found herself caught between denial and despair. She wanted to believe in the man she had married, but the shadows told a different story. While Brandon's secret relationships were already eroding the foundation of his marriage, another storm was brewing, one that had nothing to do with love, but everything to do with money. Brandon had always dreamed of financial independence. Growing up under the watchful eyes of his parents, he longed to prove that he could stand on his own, not just as Julia's husband, but as a man capable of building wealth and security. The stock market, with its promises of quick gains and dazzling success stories, seemed like the perfect opportunity. At first, his investments were modest. A few shares here, a small risk there. He studied charts late into the night, convinced that he could outsmart the system. Julia noticed his growing obsession, hours spent on his phone, endless discussions about market trends, and the constant checking of numbers. She worried, but Brandon reassured her. "This is our future," he said. "I'm building something for us." But the stock market is unforgiving. What Brandon saw as opportunities were, in reality, high-risk gambles. He poured more money into volatile stocks, chasing quick profits. Each time he lost, he doubled down, convinced that the next trade would turn everything around. The thrill of potential success blinded him to the dangers. He ignored warnings, dismissed advice, and kept investing larger sums. Julia, already shaken by suspicions of his infidelity, now faced the growing anxiety of financial instability. She asked him to slow down, to reconsider, but Brandon's pride wouldn't allow it. He wanted to prove himself, not just to Julia, but to everyone who doubted him. Then came the crash. A series of bad trades wiped out his savings. Instead of profits, Brandon was staring at massive losses. What began as a dream of independence spiraled into a nightmare of debt. By the time he realized the gravity of his situation, he had lost nearly $200,000. The financial gamble had failed. Brandon was trapped, owing money he couldn't repay, facing creditors who demanded answers. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him, and the walls began to close in. For Julia, the financial disaster was the final straw. She had sacrificed so much to build a life with Brandon, only to watch him gamble away their stability. The man she once trusted was now drowning in debt, hiding secrets, and dragging her into a storm she never asked for. Brandon's gamble had cost him more than money. It had cost him trust, stability, and the fragile hope of a future with Julia. Brandon's financial gamble had already cost him dearly, but the true nightmare began when the losses transformed into crushing debt. What started as risky trades in the stock market spiraled into obligations he could no longer escape. The figure was staggering. Nearly $200,000 owed to creditors who were growing impatient by the day. At first, Brandon tried to manage the situation quietly. He reassured Julia that everything was under control, insisting that the market would bounce back and that he would recover what he had lost. But the numbers told a different story. The debts weren't shrinking, they were multiplying. Interest piled on, deadlines loomed, and the pressure mounted. Creditors began to circle. Phone calls became relentless, letters arrived demanding payment, and the once hopeful dream of financial independence turned into a suffocating trap. Brandon's pride prevented him from asking for help. He didn't want to admit defeat, not to Julia, not to his parents, and certainly not to the public who had once admired him. Julia, already shaken by suspicions of betrayal, now faced the harsh reality of financial ruin. She had left her home country to build a future with Brandon, only to find herself entangled in a web of debt she had never agreed to. The stress was unbearable. Nights were filled with arguments, tears, and the haunting question of how they would survive. Brandon tried to juggle his obligations, making partial payments, negotiating extensions, and promising creditors that he would find a way. But promises don't pay bills. Each missed installment tightened the noose, and soon, legal threats replaced polite reminders. The debt trap wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Brandon's secret affairs had already fractured Julia's trust, and now his reckless investments were destroying the stability of their marriage. The man she had once believed in was unraveling before her eyes, consumed by lies, pride, and desperation. Friends and family began to notice the strain. Brandon looked exhausted, his once confident demeanor replaced by anxiety. Julia withdrew, her vibrant personality dimmed by the weight of betrayal and financial chaos. The couple who had once symbolized resilience on 90-Day Fiancé were now living in the shadow of a crisis that threatened to consume them entirely. The creditors would not wait forever. Lawsuits were filed, investigations began, and Brandon's world collapsed further. The debt trap had closed in, leaving no escape. What had started as a gamble for success had become a prison of obligations, dragging him toward a fate far darker than he could have imagined. The debt trap had already tightened its grip on Brandon Gibbs, but the true reckoning came when creditors decided they had waited long enough. What began as phone calls and letters soon escalated into formal legal action. Brandon's financial gamble had not only cost him money, it had now placed him squarely in the crosshairs of the law. The lawsuits arrived one after another. Creditors filed claims in court, demanding repayment of the $200,000 Brandon owed. Each document was a reminder of the choices he had made, each hearing a painful confrontation with the reality he had tried so hard to escape. Brandon, once the quiet farm boy who charmed audiences on 90-Day Fiancé, was now a defendant in a courtroom, his reputation unraveling piece by piece. The investigations were thorough, financial records were examined, transactions scrutinized, and Brandon's reckless investments laid bare for all to see. What he had tried to keep hidden was now public knowledge. The courtroom became a stage, not for romance or reality TV drama, but for the harsh truth of financial ruin. Julia sat through the hearings, her emotions torn between anger and sorrow. She had once believed in Brandon's promises of stability, but now she watched as lawyers dissected his failures, exposing the depth of his irresponsibility. Each revelation was another blow to her trust, another reason to question whether their marriage could survive. Brandon, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure. He'd argued that the market had betrayed him, that he had only tried to secure a better future, but the court was unmoved. Intentions did not erase debt, and excuses did not absolve responsibility. The evidence was clear. Brandon had gambled recklessly, and now he had to face the consequences. The pressure was immense. Media outlets began to pick up the story, fans speculated online, and the once-beloved couple became the subject of scandal. Brandon's image as the devoted husband was shattered, replaced by headlines about lawsuits, debt, and betrayal. Julia, caught in the storm, found herself dragged into a narrative she had never asked for. The legal storm was more than just a battle over money. It was the turning point in Brandon's downfall. The lawsuits stripped away the last remnants of denial, forcing him to confront the reality of his actions. For Julia, it was the moment she realized that the man she had married was no longer the man she thought he was. The courtroom battles had dragged on for months, each hearing peeling back another layer of Brandon Gibbs' unraveling life. The creditors were relentless, the evidence undeniable, and the judge's patience had worn thin. Brandon's reckless investments, his mounting debt, and his failure to meet repayment obligations had left the court with little choice. The verdict was swift and devastating. Brandon was sentenced to 7 months in prison. For a man who had once been celebrated on national television, the fall from grace was staggering. The boy next door image that had charmed millions was now replaced by the cold reality of handcuffs and a prison cell. The day of his arrest was one Julia would never forget. She stood outside the courthouse, her emotions a storm of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. Watching her husband escorted by officers, his head bowed, was a moment that shattered whatever hope remained in their marriage. The man she had defended, the man she had sacrificed for, was now a convict. Brandon himself seemed broken. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him. As he was led away, gone was the quiet confidence, replaced by shame and regret. He had gambled with money, with love, and with trust, and he had lost it all. The arrest sent shockwaves through their community. Fans of 90-Day Fiancé flooded social media with reactions, some expressing sympathy, others condemning his actions. Headlines painted him as a cautionary tale, a reality star whose pursuit of wealth and secrecy had led to ruin. The scandal was no longer confined to whispers. It was now a public spectacle. For Julia, the arrest was the breaking point. She had endured suspicions of infidelity, the crushing weight of debt, and the humiliation of courtroom battles. But seeing Brandon taken away in handcuffs was the final blow. Her love had turned into heartbreak, her marriage into a prison of its own. Inside the jail, Brandon faced the harsh reality of confinement. 7 months may not have been a lifetime, but for him, it was enough to strip away illusions. The walls echoed with regret, each day a reminder of the choices that had led him there. Outside, Julia began to distance herself. She stopped attending hearings, stopped defending him, and started imagining a life without Brandon. The arrest had not only taken away his freedom, it had taken away her faith in their future. Julia Tropkina had endured more than most could imagine, from the whispers of Brandon's secret affairs to the crushing weight of his financial ruin, and finally, the humiliation of watching her husband led away in handcuffs. Her spirit had been tested again and again. But even the strongest hearts have limits, and Julia was reaching hers. In the weeks following Brandon's arrest, Julia's world became a blur of loneliness and despair. The house they once shared felt empty, haunted by memories of laughter that had long since faded. She tried to hold herself together, but the emotional toll was overwhelming. Nights were spent in silence, tears soaking her pillow, as she replayed every moment of betrayal in her mind. Julia had sacrificed everything for Brandon. She had left her home country, endured cultural clashes, and fought tirelessly to defend their love against critics. Yet, in return, she had been met with lies, secrecy, and financial chaos. The man she had once believed in had become a stranger, consumed by pride and reckless ambition. Friends urged her to move on, to protect herself from further pain. At first, Julia resisted. She clung to the hope that Brandon might change, that prison might humble him, that their love could somehow be salvaged. But as the days passed, the weight of reality grew heavier. Brandon's choices had not only destroyed their marriage, they had destroyed her trust, her stability, and her peace of mind. Her breaking point came quietly, in a moment of clarity. Sitting alone, Julia realized that love was no longer enough. She could not continue to sacrifice her happiness for a man who had betrayed her at every turn. The decision was painful, but it was necessary. She would leave Brandon. When Julia finally told him, her voice trembled, but her resolve was firm. Brandon, still imprisoned, listened in silence. He tried to plead, to explain, but Julia's heart had already closed. She had given him chance after chance, and each time he had failed her. This time, there would be no forgiveness. The announcement marked the end of their marriage in spirit, even before the divorce papers were filed. Julia walked away, carrying the scars of betrayal, but also the strength of survival. For her, leaving Brandon was not just an act of self-preservation, it was an act of reclaiming her life. Julia's breaking point was the moment she chose herself over the chaos, dignity over despair. It was the moment she decided that her story would not end in tragedy, but in resilience. The arrest had already shattered Julia's faith in Brandon, but the true breaking point came when she realized there was no path forward. The man she had once defended against critics, the husband she had sacrificed her life in Russia for, was now a stranger, broken by betrayal, consumed by debt, and imprisoned by his own choices. Julia's decision to divorce Brandon was not made overnight. It was the result of sleepless nights, endless tears, and the crushing weight of humiliation. She had stood by him through family conflicts, through whispers of infidelity, and through the storm of financial ruin. But when Brandon was sentenced to prison, Julia knew she could no longer carry the burden of his mistakes. The paperwork was cold and clinical, but the emotions behind it were raw. Julia filed for divorce quietly, away from the cameras and the fans who had once celebrated their love story. She wanted no spectacle, no drama, just freedom. For her, the divorce was not just the end of a marriage. It was the reclaiming of her dignity, her independence, and her future. Brandon, sitting in his cell, received the news with a mixture of shock and resignation. Deep down, he had known this day would come. His actions had pushed Julia away, and his imprisonment had sealed their fate. The woman who had once stood by his side was gone, and with her departure, the last remnants of hope dissolved. The divorce became public soon after, and fans of 90 Day Fiancé reacted with a storm of emotions. Some sympathized with Julia, praising her strength for walking away from a toxic situation. Others expressed disappointment, mourning the end of a couple they had once believed in. Headlines captured the drama. Julia Trubkina divorces Brandon Gibbs after scandal and prison sentence. For Julia, however, the divorce was not about public opinion. It was about survival. She had endured betrayal, financial chaos, and public humiliation. Now, she was determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. The pain was immense, but so was the relief. In interviews, Julia spoke candidly about her decision. She described the heartbreak, the loneliness, and the realization that love alone could not fix what was broken. Her words resonated with fans who had faced similar struggles, turning her story into a symbol of resilience. The divorce marked the end of a chapter filled with betrayal and tragedy. But for Julia, it was also the beginning of something new, a chance to rediscover herself, to heal, and to embrace the possibility of love again. The divorce had marked the end of Julia Trubkina's painful journey with Brandon Gibbs, but it also opened the door to something she had longed for: freedom. For the first time in years, Julia was no longer defined by the chaos of Brandon's choices. She was free to rebuild, to rediscover herself, and to imagine a future untainted by betrayal and financial ruin. In the months following the divorce, Julia focused on healing. She distanced herself from the scandal, avoided the spotlight, and poured her energy into self-reflection. Friends described her as quieter, more contemplative, yet determined to rise above the heartbreak. She had endured humiliation, courtroom drama, and the collapse of her marriage, but she refused to let those experiences define her forever. It was during this period of rebuilding that Julia met Alex, a banker with a reputation for stability and integrity. Unlike Brandon, Alex was grounded, disciplined, and cautious with his decisions. He wasn't chasing risky dreams or hiding secrets. He was a man who valued honesty and security. For Julia, meeting Alex felt like a breath of fresh air. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Alex admired Julia's resilience, her ability to survive the storm and still carry herself with grace. Julia, in turn, found comfort in Alex's steadiness. He offered her something she had never truly experienced with Brandon: peace of mind. There were no whispers of betrayal, no looming debts, no courtroom battles, just the quiet promise of a stable future. When Alex proposed, Julia's answer was immediate. She said yes, not just to the man standing before her, but to the life he represented. Their engagement symbolized more than love. It was a declaration that Julia had survived the worst and was ready to embrace the best. News of Julia's engagement spread quickly, and fans reacted with a mix of surprise and joy. Many celebrated her decision, praising her courage to move on after such a devastating chapter. Others speculated about Alex, curious about the man who had captured Julia's heart. But for Julia, the opinions of outsiders no longer mattered. She had lived through public scrutiny once before, and this time, she was determined to protect her happiness. The engagement marked the beginning of Julia's new chapter, a chapter defined not by scandal, but by hope. She had walked away from betrayal, endured financial chaos, and survived the collapse of her marriage. Now, she was stepping into a future built on trust, stability, and love. For Julia, the story was no longer about Brandon's downfall. It was about her rise, her resilience, and her refusal to let tragedy define her. When the news of Julia Trubkina's divorce and subsequent engagement to Alex broke, the public response was immediate and intense. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé, who had followed Julia and Brandon's journey from the very beginning, flooded social media with opinions, emotions, and speculation. The couple who had once symbolized resilience and love had now become the center of one of the most dramatic scandals in the franchise's history. For many viewers, Julia's decision to leave Brandon was met with admiration. They praised her strength, her courage, and her refusal to remain trapped in a marriage defined by betrayal and financial chaos. "She deserves better," one fan wrote, echoing the sentiments of thousands who believed Julia had endured far more than anyone should. Her engagement to Alex was seen as a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life with someone who valued honesty and stability. But not everyone was supportive. Some fans expressed disappointment, mourning the end of a couple they had once rooted for. To them, Julia and Brandon's story had been a symbol of hope, that love could conquer cultural differences, family drama, and financial struggles. The divorce felt like the collapse of that dream, leaving viewers disillusioned. The media, meanwhile, seized on the scandal. Headlines painted Brandon as the fallen star, a man whose reckless choices had destroyed his marriage and reputation. Articles dissected his financial failures, his secret affairs, and his prison sentence, turning him into a cautionary tale. Julia, on the other hand, was portrayed as the survivor, the woman who had endured humiliation and heartbreak, only to rise stronger and find love again. Talk shows and podcasts debated the story, with commentators analyzing every detail. Was Julia's engagement too soon? Could Brandon redeem himself after prison? Was their marriage doomed from the start? The questions fueled endless discussions, heaping the couple in the spotlight long after their time on 90 Day Fiancé had ended. Brandon's supporters, though fewer in number, argued that he had been unfairly vilified. They claimed that his mistakes, while serious, did not erase the love he once shared with Julia. Yet, even these voices struggled to defend the undeniable facts: the affairs, the debt, the lawsuits, and the prison sentence. For Julia, the public reaction was both empowering and exhausting. She appreciated the support but grew weary of the constant scrutiny. Her engagement to Alex was deeply personal, yet it had become a public spectacle. Still, she remained determined to protect her happiness, refusing to let outside opinions dictate her future. The public reaction cemented the legacy of Julia and Brandon's story. They were no longer just reality TV stars. They were symbols of love, betrayal, resilience, and the consequences of choices made in the shadows. The storm had passed, but the scars remained. For Julia Trubkina and Brandon Gibbs, life after scandal was not about returning to what once was. It was about surviving, rebuilding, and facing the consequences of choices that had forever altered their destinies. Brandon, released after serving his 7-month prison sentence, emerged into a world that no longer saw him as the charming farm boy from 90 Day Fiancé. His reputation was tarnished, his finances destroyed, and his marriage gone. The reality of freedom was bittersweet. He was no longer behind bars, but he was trapped in the shadow of his past. Every headline, every social media post reminded him of the betrayal, the debt, and the downfall. Friends who once admired him kept their distance. Opportunities that might have offered redemption were scarce. Brandon struggled to find work, his name associated with scandal rather than success. The double life he had once tried to maintain, romantic affairs hidden from Julia, risky investments concealed from the public, had collapsed, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. His journey after prison was not about fame or fortune, it was about survival. Julia, on the other hand, stepped into a new chapter with determination. Her engagement to Alex symbolized hope, stability, and the promise of a future free from chaos. Yet, even as she embraced her new life, the memories of her past lingered. She had loved Brandon deeply, defended him fiercely, and sacrificed everything to build a life with him. Walking away had been painful, but necessary. Her story resonated with fans who saw her as a symbol of resilience. Julia became an advocate for self-worth, speaking openly about the importance of leaving toxic situations and choosing happiness. Interviews and public appearances painted her not as a victim, but as a survivor, a woman who had endured betrayal, financial ruin, and public humiliation, only to rise stronger. The contrast between Julia and Brandon's paths was stark. One was rebuilding with hope, the other struggling with regret. Yet, both carried lessons from their shared past. For Brandon, it was a reminder that pride and secrecy can destroy everything. For Julia, it was proof that strength lies in knowing when to walk away. Life after scandal was not easy for either of them. The world of reality TV had given them fame, but it had also magnified their flaws. Their story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that behind the cameras and edited episodes, real lives are at stake, lives that can be shattered by betrayal, greed, and poor choices. As Julia prepared for her future with Alex, and Brandon faced the long road of rebuilding his life, one truth remained clear. The saga of Julia Trapkina and Brandon Gibbs was more than just entertainment. It was a story of love, loss, and the fragile nature of trust. A story that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. And so, the saga of Julia Trapkina and Brandon Gibbs reaches its end. From their fairy tale beginnings on 90 Day Fiancé to the shocking revelations of betrayal, financial ruin, and Brandon's imprisonment, their journey has been nothing short of dramatic. Julia's decision to divorce Brandon was heartbreaking, yet it marked her strength and resilience. And now, with her engagement to Alex, she steps into a new chapter filled with hope and stability. But as we close this story, the questions remain. Was Julia right to walk away after everything she endured, or should she have given Brandon another chance? Could Brandon have saved his marriage if he had been honest from the start? And is Julia's engagement to Alex truly the fresh beginning she deserves, or simply a way to escape the pain of her past? Their story is more than just reality TV drama. It's a reminder of how fragile trust can be, how ambition can destroy stability, and how resilience can lead to new beginnings. Now it's your turn. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you see Julia as a survivor, or do you believe Brandon deserves redemption? What lessons should future couples on 90 Day Fiancé take from this cautionary tale? If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more untold stories behind reality TV's biggest names. More update: 90 Day Fiancé stars Julia and Brandon are currently in a very special phase of their lives. They are eagerly awaiting the arrival of their rainbow baby. Fans have been curious, wondering if Julia might have secretly given birth. Recently, Julia and Brandon confirmed the exciting news. They have welcomed not just one, but 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. Amid this joyous occasion, Julia has also opened up about feeling sad during her pregnancy, raising concern among fans about her well-being. I will explain everything. Viewers were ecstatic when Julia first announced her pregnancy, as it was a highly awaited event in the 90 Day Fiancé franchise. But her most recent post, in which she discusses the possibility of having a rainbow baby, has caused others to express alarm. Yeah, you heard it correctly. The anticipation of Brandon and Julia's impending baby has been building for some time, but things appear to have turned around lately. Currently, Julia and Brandon are talking about how they can't wait to meet their rainbow baby. Further, they confessed some stunning things, and the audience is still reeling. Just what is going on here? Was Julia all right? To what date is she due? Because this is a very contentious topic, you should read on to find out more. 90 Day Fiancé participant in Julia's mind, her dog Simba was an extension of her own family. The second one was her favorite, and she used to call the third one her son. Tragically, the couple got terrible news regarding their unborn kid because of all the things that went wrong. Simba had left Julia's life and died. As Julia announced on Instagram, it is clear that Julia is still grieving the death of her child. She was devastated. She posted a photo of herself and Simba to Instagram not long ago. This week, the famous person made the claim that she had a dream in which she saw Simba again. It is evident that Julia is still struggling to cope with this loss, despite her belief that her son is looking over her. Julia's recent announcement that she was expecting a rainbow baby shocked 90 Day Fiancé watchers. She asserted in a recent selfie post that her life should be blessed with a rainbow after each rainstorm. The famous person went on to say that she was awaiting her life's rainbow. At least her viewers were worried after seeing only one image. People were quick to speculate on what might have transpired in a Reddit thread. Her nebulous post sounds frighteningly close to describing pregnancy loss, the OP pondered. The post went on to inquire as to whether or not Julia had welcomed her first kid into the world. But one of Julia's fans noticed that December 1st was her due date on the baby registry. Therefore, she cannot have given birth previously. After Julia's dog passed away, some admirers speculated that she would be calling her first child a rainbow baby in honor of the occasion. She may now think of her biological child as her rainbow baby, much as she did with Simba, who she regarded as her own child. A commenter expressed their belief that the mother is comparing the baby to a rainbow after the loss of her beloved pet dog. In the hopes that it was true, many fans bought into this explanation. Do you have any opinions? Leave a comment and tell us. Julia and Brandon's baby is here. Did she secretly give birth? It appears that 90-Day Fiancé star Julia Trubkina's moment has finally arrived. She had an extremely lengthy pregnancy, filled with many obstacles, disagreements, and other issues. However, it appears that the celebrity has finally welcomed her child. However, she is not making the announcement public. Because of this story, viewers were persuaded, and Julia is come to finally set the record straight. She recently responded to the town's rumors on social media by revealing whether or not she had given birth. In addition, Julia revealed some startling information that left viewers reeling. What's the point here? What was it she disclosed? Learn more about this dispute by reading on, because it's a hot topic. Viewers of 90-Day Fiancé are baffled by Julia's most recent photos. She recently posted a rotating collection of photos in which she certainly didn't appear pregnant. According to reports, the celebrity opted to wish herself a happy 32nd birthday on Instagram. However, not a single photo showed her pregnancy bump. "I'm confused," a person commented. "This picture doesn't show her pregnant." Another person said, "Me too." Rumors circulated after this post that Julia may have already welcomed her first kid and was possibly hiding the information. Although admirers acknowledged that it was possible that these photos were taken prior to her pregnancy, they were certain that something was amiss. Julia's pregnancy is being discussed openly on 90-Day Fiancé. Evidently, she discussed certain images that were making the rounds on the internet that said she had given birth to a child following a dramatic birth and had even been in a vehicle accident. She was even seen in those photos with a baby in her arms. The celebrity declared that all of these photos were edited and fabricated in an attempt to put an end to the rumors. You read that correctly. Everyone who edited her images was criticized by Julia, who questioned whether they were brainless. She went on, "Are you absolutely crazy?" In addition, the celebrity posted other screenshots detailing her automobile accident and dramatic birth. Since she feels that lies about health are too much, it is obvious that all of this upset her. Julia described how some individuals altered someone else's child under her care, and she was furious about it. However, the way that people were lying about health and human life truly bothered Julia. This wasn't intended for amusement at all, and she feels that all the lines were crossed. After that, the celebrity took a time to express gratitude to their supporters. She reassured them that she was concentrating on her well-being, career, and mental health. Julia further stated that only her and her husband's official accounts will be used for such announcements. How do you feel? Please share in the comments section. Julia and Brandon confirm birth of triplets. Welcome a boy and 2 girls. After months of speculation, Julia and Brandon, stars of 90-Day Fiancé, have officially addressed the baby rumors. Their first child is now formally a member of the family. Relativity TV celebs have welcomed triplets, which is quite surprising. The arrival of a son and 2 daughters has filled Julia and Brandon with overwhelming delight. For months, the former concealed the fact that she was pregnant. A few months back, she made the big announcement. Fans have been guessing the due date and gender of the baby ever since. But Trubkina appears to have kept many information from her fans. The arrival of her triplets caught everyone by surprise. The TLC star, however, caused fresh waves when she made an odd comment about the father of her child. Myth or reality? When were the births of the babies? Star of 90-Day Fiancé Julia Trubkina first felt unprepared to become a mother. Brandon was the one she confided in about her anxieties and infertility. The reality TV personality was on the fence about undergoing surgery to address her infertility. The news of Julia and Brandon's first pregnancy came as a shock to their admirers. The couple's decision to start a family was well received by fans. Unfortunately, Julia's health has been acting up recently, and she hasn't been feeling well. It was her confession. She had trouble sleeping. A snapshot of the reality TV star appearing lifeless and pale was shared. "I feel unwell. The night was terrible," Julia wrote. She confessed to experiencing intense mental and physical distress. 2 hours of sleep per night was all the TLC star could manage. During Trubkina's first pregnancy, fans sympathized with her predicament and advised her to relax. The first child for Julia Trubkina is on the way. She has been quite good at updating her followers. A number of pregnancy rumors, however, circulated online concerning the TLC star. People are guessing that Julia has given birth already, according to Julia. She cautioned her followers against blindly believing anything they read online. The reality TV personality recently took to Instagram to dispel the speculation. Julia came clean about how she was sick of hearing about her pregnancy in the news. In her post, she announced, "Yes, we had triplets, a boy and 2 girls, which I gave birth to on September 9th. When the 90-day Fiancé star agreed with the claims circulating online, viewers adored her sense of humor. Additionally, Julia asserted that Brandon is not the biological father of her children. "Our concern was that they might resemble Betty, which led us to this decision," she continued. She went on to tease her admirers, who she assumed were expecting a child after her trip to Russia. For more than a year, the reality TV actress said that she was expecting a child. Their favorite part was when Julia started spreading false rumors about her by grilling everyone. "I can't believe some people will believe this," exclaimed one supporter. For another user, "This is the defining characteristic that makes her the most beloved cast member." Julia opens up about being sad during pregnancy. Is she okay? While pregnant with her first child with husband Brandon Gibbs, 90-day Fiancé star Julia Trubkina is unable to control her emotions. It appears that she is experiencing some depression at the moment, and her admirers are pretty concerned about her. The Russian native shares with her admirers the true cause of her sudden unhappiness. Julia has consistently been open and truthful with her fans. She had fertility problems, which made it difficult for her to conceive. The reality TV actress is thankfully enjoying the true joy of becoming a mother for the first time. However, before to the birth of her child, Julia was experiencing a great deal of emotional turmoil. She talked about how her emotions have been negatively affecting her general health. Why would it be the case? What's causing her sadness? Julia Trubkina and Brandon Gibbs, stars of 90-Day Fiancé, are ecstatic about the prospect of having their first child together. On Happily Ever After, they are sharing their baby journey. The reality TV personalities went together for their first ultrasound. To find out more about her baby's health, Julia went to see her doctor. She acknowledged that she felt a little queasy and hungover every day. The episode featured a 7-week, 4-day pregnant Russian native. When they first saw their baby on the ultrasound screen, Julia and Brandon started crying. The former made fun of her inability to cry since she is Russian in an attempt to manage her feelings. But her physician said, "Yes, you may. Indeed, you can. You still have an unborn child inside of you." Julia observed Brandon sitting quietly while shedding tears. He was crying, and she couldn't believe it. Since she became pregnant for the first time, Julia Brandon, star of 90-Day Fiancé, has been experiencing intense emotions. These past few years have been some of the most trying times in her life. Thus, on Instagram, the reality TV personality spoke up to her followers about her actual emotions. A few BTS moments from Julia's maternity photo shoot were published. She was trying out various postures and showing off her baby bump in it. "Why do you feel depressed when you take pregnancy photos?" the TLC star wrote. In the next slide, Julia reminisced about some of the times she found out she was pregnant. When she found out about her impending kid, she posted a video of her late pet, Simba, sitting quietly. The reality TV personality stated, You were the only person in the room with me at that time, and you were the first to know about it. Trapkina believes that as a result, her pet's soul is reincarnating within her. Fans can relate to how tough it must be for her to have these feelings. He will always be nestled within your heart, even though it hurts so much. One fan commented, "The toughest thing, according to another user, is losing a pet." Since the death of her fur baby, Julia has been having emotional difficulties. On Instagram, she talked candidly about the devastating experience. Simba had a close relationship with both the TLC personality and her spouse, Brandon. Julia is persuading her first kid, who was the only one in the room when she received the news. Consequently, she is rather distraught upon the death of her pet. Supporters hope the 90-day Fiancé star would move past the setback and concentrate on her future. No more today. What are you thinking about this gossip today? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned by subscribing to our channel to get more updates like this. Thank you.